Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on VA Chaplain Service, Innovations, Clinical, Spiritual Care. This webinar is a collaboration between the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships, CFBNP, and the Veterans Health Administration National Chaplain Service Office. My name is True Lester Pauling. I am the Senior Outreach Program Specialist in CFBNP. I will be your moderator this afternoon. Everyone's phone has been muted. If you have a question during the presentation today, please type it in the Q&A box on the right of your screen. I will read the questions out loud at the end of the presentation, and the presenter will provide a response. This presentation will be made available to everyone that joined the webinar today. This is a live recording. I would like to thank Chaplain Matthew Cassady for this collaboration. We are grateful for your time today. But before we get started, I would like to introduce Mr. Conrad Washington, Director of the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Mr. Washington serves as the Director for the VA Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. He retired from the United States Marine Corps with 20 years of active duty service with a combat tour in 2004 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom II. Mr. Washington is a licensed minister actively serving in his faith. He received his master's degree of divinity in pastoral studies from Moody Theological Seminary. He also holds a MA in business management and a Bachelor of Science degree in education. Additionally, he is a graduate of VA's class of 2017 Virtual Aspiring Leaders Program. At this time, I give you Mr. Washington for opening remarks.
Thank you, True. I appreciate it. And thank all of you for joining us today. As I always mention, a lot of places that we could be with all the things going on in your specific lives in the world. We appreciate you stopping by today, and I believe it's going to be beneficial to you. We want to acknowledge that this month is Pride Month. We also want to wish all of our fathers a happy Father's Day, which is this Sunday. And we also want to acknowledge Juneteenth, short for June 19th. It marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people will be freed. The troops' arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth honors the end to slavery in the United States. On June 17th, 2021, it officially became a federal holiday by President Biden. So June 2023 will occur, Juneteenth will occur on Monday, June 19th. That's next week. So I know many of us will be off. And on a lighter note, this also is the National Candy Month. So get yourself some candy if the doctor says it's okay. I also want to acknowledge Chaplain Cassady, a longtime colleague of ours who we've worked together for many years. We appreciate you, Chaplain, today, and you're so experienced and knowledgeable. And just like so many people in the VA, he has a heart to serve, and I'm sure you will see that in his presentation today. But thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. At this time, I would like to introduce Chaplain Matthew Cassady. Please read his entire bio on the screen. Chaplain Cassady is presently the National Program Manager for Community Clergy Training and Chaplain Virtual Education. He is entrusted with the sacred honor of developing relationships with rural community clergy partners and providing virtual education for onboarding chaplains. These programs ensure the spiritual well-being of our nation's veterans from transition from service through end-of-life care. Chaplain Cassady received the 2020 Distinguished Service Award from the Military Chaplains Association. He co-created both the orientation and advanced virtual chaplain education courses. He has a Master's of Divinity degree from Lincoln Christian Seminary in Lincoln, Illinois, and a Bachelor's of Arts in Pastoral Studies from Christian Life College in Mount Prospect, Illinois. He also is certified by the National Association of VA Chaplains with a specialty in mental health. At this time, I give you our speaker for today, Chaplain Matthew Cassady. Chaplain Cassady.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining with us today. It's always wonderful to be with the CFBNP team. So thank you, and we will get started here with the slides. If we can see the next one, that's who I am. Give us a little update. The next slide's fine. Yeah, sorry. A little bit about who we are. I'm going to tell you about National Chaplain Service, and we'll talk about some of the spiritual innovations that we're working on. So, National VA Chaplain Service. We are located in Washington, D.C. We've got office in VA Central office on 810 Vermont, just about a block and a half away from the White House. I think a whole floor away from Conrad and team. And so we've got quite a bit happening there. It has absolutely been a blessing to be located in Washington, D.C., and has allowed National Chaplain Service to grow and to have more interaction with the folks that are making decisions for veterans care and in our nation. So a little bit about what we do. We develop innovative chaplain and spiritual care policies to provide some inspirational chaplain education and training, and then we implement those effective and diverse spiritual care programming. And one of the ways that we do that, we've got policies that are always working in the background that we're working on developing. As things go into government, we'll probably get them all back right around the same week for dissemination to everyone. So we'll have quite a few new policies coming out, hopefully in the near future. And we look at not only what we've done in the past, what's worked good, what hasn't worked good, but we look at what some of the potential touch points that we can make, big strides and big differences in veterans' lives. And so when we work on innovating new spiritual care policy or new spiritual care programs, that's what we're doing, and that's one of the things that I get to do in my position. So next slide. Give you a little bit about what a VA chaplain is and does. Someone who has a call within a call. I was working in churches when felt very called to go into the military. And then when my time in the military was up, I was praying about what was next. And God led me to another ministry. And then from that ministry led me into the VA. But it was a lot of time of searching and discernment. Very much a call within a call. We have to have a strong foundational faith, which means we have an endorsement that comes from our ecclesiastic group. So whatever church group you might be a part of, I'm sure that they have an ecclesiastical endorsement process for folks that are pursuing chaplaincy in the federal government. We've all got 4 units of clinical pastoral education. I've got 5 in ACPE. I did 4 with the Army at Fort Sam Houston, the only level 1 trauma facility in the military infrastructure for CPE training, which was pretty wonderful. Got to do a lot of hands-on ministry, but also got to be exposed to a lot of different treatment initiatives that were going on, and kind of began to spur on some of those innovative ideas. VA chaplains are called to minister to people of all faiths, traditions, and backgrounds. I am a very proud and very devout Christian man, but I certainly respect everyone's choices in life, and to follow whatever they choose to, and to keep their faith strong. My goal is that, when I wake up in the morning, I am thinking about Jesus. I'm thinking about my day and how wonderful and how blessed it is to live and to breathe and to be able to serve another day in the VA. And my hope for everyone is that their faith does that for them as well. VA chaplains are people who serve as clinical providers in healthcare settings. And so we all, I still have a patient load for Alaska that I see virtually. And then we don't serve by ourselves, except for, oddly enough, we have about 3 centers that have 1 chaplain only, that are working on getting some more. But you're never alone. We have interdisciplinary team members that we serve alongside. And so we learn very quickly what it's like to be a member of the team, and what it's like to serve together for the benefit of the veteran. And I think one of the big keys is that chaplains are somebody who's going to hear the veteran's story, who's really going to listen to the veteran. A lot of our veterans have had interactions with chaplains in the military. I'd say probably 95% of them are good. I actually don't know that I've ever heard a veteran that I've cared for that had a bad interaction with the chaplain, but I'm sure it's out there somewhere. But chaplains are people that are very approachable. Whether it was doing physical training in the morning, whether it was in the chow line sometime, or if it was out in the field doing preventive maintenance on a Humvee at the rifle range, helping police brass, load ammo, do all kinds of different stuff because we weren't shooting. We live life among those that we serve, and because we are those that we serve, and so there is a level of approachability that happens with chaplains in the VA that's a carryover from the approachability of chaplains in the military. And then I think an important thing that we should always emphasize is that a VA chaplain is someone who honors the faith of the veteran. Again, my faith is mine. I want people to have that faith, but I realize that people are on different journeys. They're at different places in their lives. I can be the example that I can be, but it's people's choices. And if someone came up and said, "Hey, I'm not of this faith, I'm of this," let's talk about what you want to talk about. I recall a time in Afghanistan where I was at a mosque opening. We had spent some money refurbishing a mosque, getting them a new sound system, getting some new carpets and things. We traveled through some interesting terrain to get to the mosque for the unveiling. The mullah came up to me, and we had a translator, and so we were working on some, just talking some different stuff. And he said, "Well, we can get together. We are all people of the book." And I just looked at him and I smiled and I said, "Well, that works good, but our tradition, we don't get out of Genesis before we start having some problems. So can we make a couple of concessions for one another?" And he was like, "Okay." I'm like, I'm I'm not gonna degrade or change my faith, and you're not gonna degrade or change your faith. And so we're gonna respect the faith that we're in, and we're gonna respect who we are as individuals and people. And he was like, "Okay, what do you want to talk about for the next 2 hours then?" And I was like, "Oh, let's talk about our kids. Like mine are 8,000 miles away. I just found out on a ride over here because my battalion commander had a TACSAT communication device, and he got a brief from the FRG that my oldest daughter broke her wrist in a roller skating accident last night." And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry you had to be away from your family." And I was like, "No, no, that's not why I'm bringing it up. Thank you, but that's not why I'm bringing it up." He said, "Okay, so why do you mention this?" And I said, "Because as much as it pains me to be 8,000 miles away from my daughter when she's recovering with this broken wrist, and that I just want to give her a hug and tell her everything's going to be okay," I said, "I can't imagine what you must live every day with your children that are in this war zone. How do you do that?" And he stopped for a moment and he said, "The thing that I want more for my children more than anything else is that they know peace in their lifetime." And so we had a great discussion after that, and it actually was incredibly fruitful because we were honest, we were both forthright, we were both both people devout in our faith, very much believed that we were on the right path, right? We made room for one another to either be right or wrong according to our traditions, and but we found commonality in that we both wanted peace for our children, and we wanted our children to have blessed and prosperous lives. So we honor the faith of those around us, much like we honor the faith of our veterans. Next slide. Give you a little bit of profile of a VA chaplain. We have GS9 probationary chaplains that come in with 2-year temporary positions. They have 2 years to become board certified. There are no extensions authorized. So if they don't become board certified within that 2 years, they are leaving the VA. Then we have our Chaplain GS11, which is the full performance level. It requires us 4 units of CPE, board certification, and 1 year of chaplain experience, and that's the base requirements for the full performance level. Then, of course, we have the GS12 chaplains that meet all those base requirements, and then the specialty certification on top of that. And then separately, parallel to that, we have clinical pastoral educators who are also GS12s that meet all those base requirements, but they also are certified educators through either the Association of Clinical Pastoral Education or ICPT, which is the College of Pastoral Trainers. So we have two different groups that we work with. They're both great. They provide wonderful training. And then we have our supervisory chaplains at GS 12 and 13 level, which are those base requirements. The idea is that they have specialty certifications. And then, of course, we have our national program managers. I'm one of those. We have those base requirements plus the specialty certification. And then we have directors of the VA National Chaplain Service 1 right now. That's Director Kimberly Willis, who is actually at some training in Phoenix this week, which has all the base requirements, especially certification. She happens to be a certified educator with ACPE as well. And so quite a bit of education, quite a bit of experience, quite a bit of additional pastoral training above the Master in Divinity and the church experience and what's required to obtain the ecclesiastical endorsement from your faith group. The next slide. And just a little bit more about clinical pastoral education and the advanced fellowship trainings. That there are two, the groups here. There you have the Association of Professional Chaplains, APC, that at one point in time had a pretty good relationship with ACPE. Not that it's bad, they were getting ready to merge, and then they kind of pulled back from that. And then, of course, the Institute of Clinical Pastoral Education, Clinical Pastoral Training would it be. And then we also work with the Office of Academic Affiliations, those advanced fellowships and professional development. And so just a note that the chaplains who complete CPE training within the VA healthcare system may be direct hires. So we're able to hire folks right out of completing their residencies or fellowships, and we're able to direct hire them in and skip about 4 months of the hiring process. That next slide. And then here's our board certification. We have 6 agencies that are recognized by the VA to provide board certification for chaplains. The ACCC, as I call them, the Association of Certified Christian Chaplains, then the APC, the Association of Professional Chaplains, the National Association of Catholic Chaplains, and then the Neshama Association of Jewish Chaplains, and the National Association of Veterans Affairs Chaplains, NAVEC, which isn't a VA entity, just have a lot of VA chaplains that volunteer for the board certification agency, and then Spiritual Care Association. Next slide. And here's our specialty certifications that chaplains are going to have. We have the Association of Professional Chaplains has a palliative care and hospice, and they also have a military specialty certification. We don't utilize the military specialty certification in the VA, so it's primarily the palliative care and hospice. And the National Association of Veterans Affairs Chaplains has the following 6: hospice and palliative care, drug and alcohol addiction, post-traumatic stress disorder, mental health, moral injury, and suicide prevention. Right, and then that next slide. And here's some application essentials for USA Jobs. Of course, all those wonderful things to read through. What I always tell folks is if you're going to fill out the form and you're going to do everything on USA Jobs, make sure you send everything, because no one's going to call you up and say, hey, you're missing something. You just simply won't be considered for it. So it's always good to send more information than less. And now the next slide. All right, so talking about some of our recent developments. So I told you where, kind of the base knowledge of what we are, and I'm going to talk a little bit about some recent developments we've got. We recently were reorganized, and so the National Director of VA Chaplain Service became a direct report to the VA Undersecretary for Health. So Kimberly Willis meets with Dr. Elnahal on a regular and recurring basis. She's actually a member of his staff and a direct report, and so that's a wonderful thing for chaplains. We moved offices from 12 to 10, which really just cuts out an extra layer of kind of intermediary between chaplain service and the USH, which has worked out really well and allowed for a lot of great conversations to happen. All VA chaplain services nationwide became independent of another service. Those became direct reports to a member of the local executive leadership team. And so chaplain services, there were some sites that had tendencies to put chaplains underneath. It could be underneath food and nutrition, could be underneath social work service, could be underneath geriatric and extended care. And so what this reorganization did was chaplains are now reporting members to the executive leadership team. And so they're not within an office, they are their own office. And then a few years ago, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services approved the first ever standalone healthcare common procedures code, or HCPCS codes, 3 of them for VA chaplains. And so that has allowed VA chaplains to track in the method that makes the most sense for CMS, and allowed us to have better visibility because we are now using the same encounter system that the rest of the VA clinical providers use, which certainly just allows, again, more visibility, more clarity, more transparency, and it's a lot better for us to be able to tell our story. The next slide. Some more of those recent developments, just skip over here to the other one. The VA chaplains acquired a clinical budget object code, which is nothing more than accounting, but it's an accounting line specific to chaplains, which again was another thing that's allowed for some good developments and some good branching out. And then we converted from Title V, which was administrative personnel. We previously were side by side with the logisticians and HR folks, and we moved over to Title 38 hybrid with the rest of the clinical treatment team, and then we officially became clinical employees. This made an immediate impact to, if we're now members of the clinical team, we're now in Title 38 hybrid. There are certain hiring advantages. There are certain things that go a little bit faster. We have different recruitment incentives. And then we simply have more ability to bring on more chaplains to meet the needs of the veterans that we're serving. Next slide. And here's some emerging care. And so we've got partnerships with the Office of Mental Health and Suicide Prevention, as VA chaplains served on high-risk committees throughout the VA. The South Georgia, North Florida VA medical system has a great plan and program together with the suicide prevention team there. The chaplains work hand in hand, and they just reported their 1,000th interaction with a veteran on the high risk tracker, and which is wonderful. That's another life impacted by chaplains. They have reported many times where they have called and reached out to folks that folks were in really deep and dark places, and they have absolutely saved a life. Chaplains again are asked at VACO to provide daily inspirations, prayers, and really just being a part of that group and of the VACO leadership team. We have chaplains are now listed within the Office of Emergency Management Manual, which means that chaplains are not an afterthought. We're now right there alongside the other responses during emergency systems, which has been very helpful for chaplains as well. And then the National Center for Organizational Development for VA chaplains to provide spiritual care and encouragement for VA employees. Years ago, when I first came into the VA, we were all told that chaplains are not to provide any care for staff, that we were exclusively for the care of the veterans, which was different from what a lot of folks experienced in the military. And more recently, in more recent past, really since COVID came out, a lot of leadership teams said, you know what, we think we're gonna, let's kind of take the barriers away from chaplains that would say, you can't work with staff, you can't care for staff, and let's make that part of what they do. And so we're able to care for staff. We still have to manage that together with our clinical load of veterans that we see, but it certainly empowers and enables us to be able to care for those who are caring for our veterans together. Next slide. And so here's some updates. You'll see clinical pastoral education for the National Chaplain Center. We now have a National ACPE Center. The focus is really on developing new certified educators. We've been able to see some trends and seen some retirements happen with certified educators, and just as a nation and as a chaplain education process, there are never enough certified educators. And so this has allowed us to recruit and begin to train an additional set of certified educators on the national level that hopefully at some point will have us not have big gaps for programs if someone decides to retire or if someone decides to leave VA and go to another form of ministry. that we don't have long gaps of coverage, and we're able to keep CPE programs happening, uh, which is a valuable thing for the veterans that we serve and the team members that we serve with. Recently, there's been an additional focus on establishing spiritual competencies of care that's unique to VA settings. And so we've pulled a lot of subject matter experts from throughout the field. Chaplain Clay Faust has worked with all of these individuals, and they've really worked to make more specific and targeted outcomes and competencies for VA chaplains for training. And maybe someday it'll be something that we use for staff as well. But right now, it's designed for trainees. But it's a wonderful thing when you can give folks a lot more specific guidance than just speaking in general terms and saying, hey, we want to make sure that we establish rapport with veterans as a competency, versus we want to make sure the veteran understands that they're heard, that they're understood, and that you're advocating for them. And so we're putting more in that to make it more understandable for our trainees, but also to have a better chaplain at the end of that training prepared to serve our veterans. And then we're doing some more synergistic work across VA Vice individual programs. And so we have broken out of a lot of silos in the last 3 to 4 years. We've knocked some silos down, and we've worked on rebuilding things with low walls, with low thresholds, so we can walk back and forth and work with a lot of folks. And so that has been very intentional. What that does is that has given us more consistent training outcomes, and it's given us more consistent chaplain performance at VA medical centers. And so the old refrain from VA has been, if you've seen one VA, you've seen one VA. We are closing that gap for chaplain services. It used to be very similar to that as well. Like if you've seen one chaplain service, you've seen one chaplain service. We're bringing that closer to say, well, if you've seen a chaplain service in one location, it's going to look really similar to the chaplain service at this other location. And so we're kind of norming a lot of these specific functions that we need chaplains to be able to provide. We're taking away a little bit of the not really uniqueness, again, some of those silos that get built in local facilities. And we're saying, hey, we need to keep those silos, keep the walls off. Let's keep talking. Let's keep cross talking. Let's keep working with the interdisciplinary team. And so we're having a lot better outcomes with our veterans that we care for, especially as veterans continue to be mobile, right? Like in the Army, I moved every 2 years. Unless I was sort of school for 6 months or a school for a year, 2 years was my norm. A lot of veterans have that high mobility, and so they don't stay in one area for that long. And so having consistent chaplain services across the nation has been very helpful for quite a few veterans. The next slide, we'll talk about spiritual care innovation, something that I get to work with on a regular basis. We partner with spiritually focused research groups. We have some within the VA. We have a center in Togus, Maine that does moral injury syndrome repair work. They're probably 6 months away from being the VA's moral injury center, but they do very targeted work on moral injury syndrome. They have specific training that they've provided that we have given to chaplains across the nation, and we've given to community providers across the nation that have then been able to take this back to their churches, their nonprofits, and have really been able to impact veterans' lives. But moral injury syndrome continues to be an emerging field that we continue to work in. But I think that as faith providers, we are uniquely provided to have that moral discussion for the moral dilemma and the moral injury that can occur with veterans through their service. And then developing an environment of spiritual exploration, or developing an environment of exploration of spiritual care. So I meet with chaplain staff on a fairly consistent basis to discuss those unique opportunities, again, that might be local to a VA medical center mission, that then we kind of cross level it across VA as a whole. So if they're going to work on a program, work on developing something, it's something that's going to have broad implications across VA. Vice, something that's going to be constrained and siloed to work in just one facility. And we've got folks that have some great ideas and have some very unique attributes and skill sets that I believe are God-given. And so to help folks develop and grow and work in those, are wonderful to be a part of. And then that next slide, the Rural Community Clergy Training Program. Last year, we trained over 1,000 participants. The majority of them are clergy and lay leaders. We have a great cohort of trainers, and then we have, again, a great group of clergy and lay leaders that come out to these trainings. And now next year, we're going to expand on the pilot projects. That is the second point. We had a couple chaplains that were very intentional with engaging more than simply houses of worship, more than clergy, more than lay leaders. They went to nonprofits in their communities and said, hey, would you like to hear about some things that veterans are experiencing? So they talked about moral injury syndrome. Then we did some suicide prevention training, and we really began to build bridges and inroads for cross referrals back and forth to one another. And so we're, if you're training folks at a food bank, those folks, as they meet veterans, they're able to refer veterans to care in the VA, or if we're in VA care and we have a veteran that comes in and says, hey, like I don't have money, I don't have groceries. We now have built relationships with folks in the community that we can refer over. We also train police departments who, surprisingly or not surprisingly, have moral injury syndrome symptoms as well. And so the training helps identify and provide self-care for them, but then also see that in veterans as well, that, oh, we have some commonalities, we have these things we're looking at, and that we've experienced maybe in different parts of the globe, but that we've all experienced, and we have, some commonalities here. And then the suicide prevention training, again, some of it's self-care. It's become suicide prevention training for the police themselves or the firefighters. But then also, as they're working with veterans, that they see some key components. And then again, they've got that handshake and that warm handoff back to the local VA medical center, where hopefully their veterans are going to be able to continue to receive care. And then that next slide should be one of the last ones. The bereaved family care, we were able to secure funding for a national bereaved family network. And what this will do is it's going to have a national impact, where local medical facilities, local VA chaplain services will be able to quickly find, locate, and contact bereaved family members without the need to go through 3 or 4 layers of medical records, or go through 5 or 6 different processes. This cuts through a lot of that, and it streamlines the care for the bereaved family members on every side. And so the visibility that it gives us, and the ability to, again, kind of build those bridges and inroads, is wonderful. It'll probably be about 1.5 years before we get the trial online, and probably a couple of years before we get the final product ready to be distributed throughout all the national VA medical centers. But it's going to be a great time saver for folks, and it's going to keep folks talking to bereaved family members, talking to veterans, as opposed to pouring through charts to try to find contact information and things of that nature. And then, of course, the National Chaplain Service continues to serve as readers and reviewers for bereaved family initiatives and engagement. And we also get asked to be readers and reviewers for quite a few programs that are on the research review boards that VA has, and we're asked to provide input. And we represent the spiritual, we also represent human dynamics. And so we're asked regularly. We have 2 chaplains at National Chaplain Service that serve on the internal review boards. And then every one of us gets asked, probably at least on a monthly basis, to read a fairly lengthy article, to give some recommendations, to give some notes. And we've had some really good success with that, with kind of cutting through a first pass back layer that, instead of it taking 4 to 6 months, it takes about a week. So again, just things that we've been able to do that have been, forward looking, and wonderful things for veterans and the veterans that we care for. And then the next slide should be suicide prevention and postvention. We're really beginning to look at postvention care. It's been really this calendar year that nationally postvention care has began to enter the chat, as it were, and folks have begun to say, well, what about post-vention care? What do we do for family members that are suicide survivors that have had a loved one that has died by suicide? What care are we able to provide? And so I've done quite a few trainings, either webinars or in person for folks that are bereaved family members that their veteran has died by suicide. And so the good post-vention care is good prevention care. A friend of mine, Carter Check, said that, and it's incredibly true. And then, of course, we work with our local VA medical centers to integrate spiritual care into suicide prevention and post-care. We continue to add numbers of chaplains that are part of the suicide prevention committees at each VA medical center, and we continue to represent the spiritual on those teams, and also to ask the questions about how does your faith inform what you're experiencing right now? How can your faith become a strength for you? How can your faith become an anchor for what you're going through right now? And how can we partner with you to see you succeed? And so, again, great things that we're able to be a part of, that we're humbled on a daily basis to be a part of. Then that next slide should be pretty close to the end. And so I will take some questions if someone's got some that have been going on.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Cassady, for that informative presentation. We will now address the questions in the Q&A box to the right of your screen. I'm going to read the questions out loud, and because we do have folks that have called in, and they're not on their computers. And Chaplain Cassady will ask you to provide a response. If we are unable to get around to all the questions today, we will take down the questions and forward them to Chaplain Cassady, and he can provide a response directly back to you. We do have your email addresses. Okay, let's get to the questions. Our first question is coming from Ms. Kimberly. Her question is, will the VA have chaplain assistant positions like they have in active duty? I'm very interested in a position like that.
Yeah, hey, thank you for the question. We have no plans to have chaplain assistants like we have in the military and DoD. We have, in some levels, you might have like a secretary, or the next level might be a program support assistant. There's advanced program support assistants, and then we have administrative officers. And so somewhere on that spectrum, somewhere between the GS5 and the GS9, we have positions really based on the size of the facility and the size of the chaplain service. So not chaplain assistants, but we do have folks that work in the office that are part of the chaplain teams that are not chaplains. Thank you.
Thank you very much. She has another question for you. Can you be in rabbinic school on the probationary status?
No, so when you're on probationary status, your school is done. So your rabbinic school would be done. You would already have done 4 units of CPE with one of those 2 agencies, either the ACPE or ICPT. And so when you're on a probationary status, you've basically got those 2 years to achieve board certification. And so your board certification requires a certain amount of experience post-training. And so that would come after the school. So you'd have to get rabbinic school complete, do CPE complete, and then you would be eligible after that ecclesiastical endorsement to be able to apply towards a GS9 probationary position.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Cassady. Next question is coming from Gorson Dotson. And his question is there a remote solution for individuals to worship on a 24/7, 365-day basis and from anywhere? Has immersive virtual worship been offered?
Yeah, we have, there's one facility, Chillicothe, Ohio, that has been working to establish a virtual worship setting. We have a couple things that we run into there is that it has to be requested by the veterans. It can't just be put out there. So it's not a federally funded church service that's happening. It's if the veteran requires to join into it, then they can. So there's just some requirements that are different because it's the federal government, because we have a constitution that separates church and state, and so we have to be careful with that. But I regularly go on YouTube. I'll watch some worship videos. I'll watch a sermon from some of my older pastors in places that I've worshiped, and so those things are certainly available. But as apps or other virtual programs that are driven that way. Chillicothe, Ohio has a program that they're getting ready to run out with. They've done some tests on it, but again, it will be veterans will have to request to join, and that's just some of the stipulations that legal has with us. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. The next question is coming from Jason Denny. Hello, sir. What is the name of the section Chaplain Cassady is representing?
Yeah, perfect. So I am National Chaplain Service, one member of probably a handful. We've got about a dozen with us right now. So National Chaplain Service at Veterans Healthcare. So it's VHA, Office of National Chaplain Service.
Thank you so much. Next question from Daryl Brown. Where and when is training provided? How are attendees selected to participate in training? And is any training conducted in Alaska?
So yeah, so our chaplain, we've got Alaska is one of those sites that has one chaplain. He's conducted he's conducted all of his training events for the year for the Rural Community Clergy Training Program. I'm imagining that's what you're asking about. He's completed his training for the year. It's by fiscal year, and so the last quarter we use to wrap everything up to ensure that we've got everything kind of buttoned up, and then we can report on it. But yeah, we have that. If you email your information into Mr. Washington and crew, they will get that over to me, and I can, of course, pass that right on to Chaplain Zachary, who's out in Anchorage. And I think last week he was traveling all over the state to do some bridge building and some community engagement with folks.
Thank you so much, Chaplain Cassady. Our next question is coming from Miss Colleen Canberra. She says, hello, thank you for your information. Would a spouse/caregiver be able to have chaplain services available to them if they requested it if their veteran passes away?
Absolutely. So the VA has the Caregiver Support Program. Its acronym is CSP. So you're probably familiar with that from your time as being a caregiver. But then absolutely, when our veterans pass, caregivers, bereaved family members are authorized up to an additional year of bereavement care. And so that really is dependent on what you need. Sometimes it's a bereavement group, sometimes it's individual sessions. We have, I think most facilities now have at least one, if not more, virtual memorial services, which is the time for folks to come together. They can be in person. We went virtual with COVID, of course, but we're keeping that option available for folks that might be traveling from long distances in. And so, yeah, there's quite a bit that's available. Feel free to email me. They'll give you the number or my email address, and I'll be happy to connect you with some folks.
Thank you so much. Next question from Ms. Jean Gamalinda. Do you work or collaborate with the local psychiatrists, integrating faith with non-invasive treatments?
Yeah, so local psychiatry outside of the VA, we probably have less of that, less involvement with that, but that's one of the things that we do when we meet with community clergy, is we encourage those handshakes and that bridge building together with one another. Much like if I was to go into my pastor and we were really working through some stuff, and so he was providing some pastoral counseling, and he said, Matt, like, I get what you're going through. I think it would be good as we continue to meet. I think it would be good if you saw a psychiatrist. That's only going to really happen if the psychiatrist and the pastor or the clergy person has a relationship and a pre-established relationship. And so sometimes we will be the connectors for folks between clergy local psychiatry providers, either psychiatrists, psychologists, or social workers. We will help to connect folks. And so, limited on our side, but we do absolutely encourage the local clergy to be able to have that communication with local psychiatric services.
Okay, this next question is from Laurel Forrest. I don't know if you'll be able to answer that or not. Chaplain, you can give it a stab. But the question is, we serve homeless, and this is from Laurel Forrest. She says, we serve homeless veterans in the community, and by building permanent housing with the VA BASH program for up to 300 to 400 homeless veterans in our region, and I believe she's in Los Angeles. Can the VA in Los Angeles work with us to provide chaplain service to our resident veterans and in the field for the homeless veterans who are still living in the desert in tents prior to being qualified to enter our housing?
Certainly a possibility. So I think for most things that we're able to do, it depends on a couple things. The biggest thing is funding and resources. A lot of chaplain services are, operating at about 110% capacity, focusing on the care that we're providing inside the four walls of the facility, and then even to like our community-based outpatient clinics. And so when we have a program like HUD-VASH, which of course is connected to the local VA facility, doing site visits along with the HUD-VASH team and being, involved in proactive care. Um, it, when I came from Albuquerque, we had the VIC, which was the Veteran Integrated Center, where veterans would it was like a stopping point before they went into HUD-VASH. We do what we can, but we don't always have the resources. And so what I would say is advocate for the group that you're with, ask for chaplain services to be a part of it. And if you continue to ask and continue to kind of raise the flag and make the case, then that's going to help funding. I think so. I've rarely met chaplains that enjoy saying no to anybody that's asked for help or asked for services. It's generally a painful thing to do, but at the end of the day, we only have so many hours and we only have so many chaplains. And so if you see that as a need that this would be incredibly helpful, I'd encourage you to talk to your chaplain service there at the Greater Los Angeles facility, meet with the executive leadership team and talk about, hey, how can we have chaplains more involved with the HUD-VASH team, and how can we do that, even if it starts as what we would call a 0.25 of a full-time equivalent chaplain. So even if it starts as they're going to do that for 10 hours a week, 10 hours is better than 0 hours. And it certainly allows folks to prove the concept of, oh, a chaplain would be very gainfully employed and very needed and very appreciated in these programs. So I would just reach out and start drinking coffee with folks and let them know what you need and what your vision is.
Okay, thank you so much, Chaplain. We have a few more minutes. We have another question from Laurel Forrest. And she says, I am a lay minister in the Episcopal Church for 35 years, trained in specialty of serving those who are chronically ill, disabled, residents of convalescent homes, and now to veterans who are without shelter for 2 to 5 years homelessness. How can we work with the VA chaplaincy to assist our veterans transitioning to homes and then to rejoining the society?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And thank you for the work that you do, not just with the veterans, but with society at large, right? You've been doing that for better than 3 decades. And so thank you for continuing to do it, continuing to serve, right? It's absolutely wonderful. Like, I would say, much like I said to the last question, go in and talk to the local chaplain service. Say, hey, I'd love to set up a time to meet. Can we sit down and have a discussion about what you could, potentially provide for us out here? Talk to the local leadership. If HUD-VASH is a great connector as well. And so if as you're working with the HUD-VASH program, you say, hey, we'd really like to get a chaplain involved with this as well. And if HUD-VASH says, hey, we need a chaplain over here, that's going to be a huge multiplier to your request for chaplain support for our veterans and for everybody that's there.
Okay, thank you so much, Chaplain Cassidy. There are quite a lot of comments by Ms. Forrest, and you can read them here. Last question, because our first housing facility will house 14 veterans in individual bedrooms, bath, kitchenette, suites, to be followed by another physician on a facility on 5 acres parcel in Los Angeles County with 36 veterans each, and hope to join our spiritual services. And we would like to develop a spiritual program with VA Chaplaincy. How can we do that?
Wow, that's amazing. So I would say reach out to the GLA chaplains, the Greater Los Angeles Chaplain Service. Start talking with them. I would be incredibly happy to be a part of that conversation and put you in contact with some resources that I have across the nation that could help you develop that. I think that sounds phenomenal. And that is life giving and life breathing. Absolutely great. Let me know how we can be a part of it. We could absolutely help you try to either develop or to use some materials that other folks have found incredibly useful.
And she also has another question about helping this Army veteran that has relocated across the country. We'll forward this email to you,
Okay.
Cassidy. She's asking for help for this gentleman, and that let me go down and see if there's anything else here. I know we do have folks on the phone call. And I don't see any more questions here. We have a lot of comments. We'll make sure you get all of those, Chaplain Cassidy. And we thank you so much for that great presentation with wealth of information for all of our audience on the call today. Mr. Washington had to jump off for a speaking engagement on another webinar, and he thanks everyone for joining us today. If you registered for this event, we will provide you with today's presentation. A recording of this webinar will be provided on our website at a later date. Please subscribe to our website and Facebook for future webinars and information. This adjourns today's webinar. Thank you again, Chaplain Cassidy. We appreciate you and appreciate your time. And thank you all that are on the call. Thank you and have a safe and a wonderful day.
Y'all take care. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.